This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Gary Lane. Today is Tuesday, December 16th. We begin this half hour in Sydney, Australia. 2 days after the Hannukah massacre, Jewish communities around the world and their supporters are gathering to show their support for the victims of the worst terror attack in more than 30 years in Australia. As Chris Mitchell reports, Jewish groups are also calling for greater security and vigilance.
Thousands of Australians gathered on Monday to mourn the victims of the mass shooting at Bondi Beach in Sydney.
All it is hate. It's just purely two people that came down to Bondi yesterday with the intent of killing Jews. It was really terrifying for all the Jews, all around the world even.
Jewish communities also held vigils in Manchester and London, England, and in Boulder, Colorado, the site of an anti-Semitic attack in June when a man hurled a Molotov cocktail at people demonstrating in support of Israeli hostages in Gaza.
500 plus people came out to Boulder where there was a terrorist attack right here, and we're sharing our light. We're standing strong, we're standing proud in the Jewish community, and we're going to fight darkness with light. We can share a little bit more light, we'll dispel a lot of darkness.
Australian officials say ISIS fueled the attack.
Early indications point to a terrorist attack inspired by Islamic State, allegedly committed by a father and son. There is no evidence to suggest other individuals were involved in this attack. However, we caution that this could change given it is early in our investigation.
At Bondi Beach, Israel's ambassador to Australia came to the memorial.
My heart is torn apart because the Jewish community, the Australians of Jewish faith, the Jewish community is also my community, my people. What one can expect when graffitis are painted all over Australia on synagogues, buildings, public buildings, calling for the death of Israel, death to the I.D.F.
Some Jewish leaders said the writing was on the wall.
And he's been talking very loudly and very clearly this entire year for anyone who could listen, that what started off with graffiti is going to end up with bodies, and it's exactly what's happened.
This is a wake-up call for our nation to stand side by side with its Jewish community and side by side with the State of Israel.
Several major Jewish organizations are now calling for increased security following the Sydney attack. Their message: this was not an isolated incident, and protecting Jewish communities must now be treated as a national and global priority. This Australian rabbi sent his own message.
Be proud of who you are. Don't water down your identity for the sake of being scared of what other people are going to say or do. But in addition, what Rabbi Eli would say is that not just for Jews, but for every single Australian, be more godly. We're created in the image of God. Let's all act in the image of God. Let's love each other. Let's care for each other.
Now to the latest in Israel. The I.D.F. killed a Hamas former deputy commander over the weekend. Now, President Trump says Israel may have violated the ceasefire due to that killing. The Trump administration says they were not informed of the attack in advance and sent a message to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu describing an Israeli violation. Israel denies any violation and pointed out that Hamas broke the ceasefire with an explosive attack that wounded 2 soldiers. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us now from Jerusalem. Chris, what is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's response to the Trump administration saying that Israel violated the ceasefire agreement?
Well, Gary, the government and Netanyahu, they justifying the attack as a necessary retaliation for what Hamas has been doing. They don't consider this a violation of the ceasefire. Netanyahu is portraying it Hamas's behavior that's in conflict with the principles of the Trump plan and the ceasefire. The Hamas leader, Saad, was rebuilding Hamas's military. That's in violation of the truth. And Netanyahu, as well as the security establishment, says Israel will make its own decisions about their security. So no official apology or concession about the strike violating the ceasefire. And then we're looking forward, Gary, to the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump this coming December 29th. We know that Gaza is going to be a major topic, and we're talking about phase 1. Will Hamas disarm? And that seems to be the major sticking point going forward inside Gaza.
And what are some Jewish leaders in Israel saying about what happened in Australia since October 7th?
Well, as we said in our report, the writing was on the wall, literally, an explosion of anti-Semitic acts after October 7th. And some, Gary, point to October 9th, 2023, just 2 days after October 7th, as a real turning point. There was a mass protest outside the Sydney Opera House. We reported on this before, but there were chants of, where's the Jews? Chants of, gas the Jews. And yet there were no arrests, there were no charges. For some Jews, that felt like a breaking point where the literally ground moved beneath our feet. There were cars and synagogues later being burned. And then we heard that chilling statement in our report that the graffiti, the writing on the wall, leads to bodies. And it just happened. It came to be true there on Bondi Beach.
Yes, globalized intifada. That's what they were chanting also on college campuses here in the U.S. So where do some say that the two terrorists visited before the attack in Australia?
Well, the father and the son, that was Sajid and also Naveed, apparently they visited the Philippines. And some believe this was just last month. They might have visited an ISIS training camp there in the Philippines. And the question is, did they receive military training? And also the son has been seen at the protest at the Sydney Opera House that I just mentioned. That was on October 9th. And that was before the I.D.F. went into Gaza. And as I said, many people see that was a turning point. No arrests, no charges. But apparently those two, the father and the son, did go to the Philippines. Maybe they met with ISIS sympathizers or even a training camp.
Chris, I've been down there. There are plenty of them down in Mindanao, and we can hopefully count on our Filipino friends to investigate that. So what can we expect on today's Jerusalem Dateline, Chris?
Well, we have updates about the latest situation. Also part of an interview that was seen yesterday on the 700 Club with Rabbi Abraham Cooper. He was just eloquent in his explanation of the explosion of anti-Semitism around the world, and also talking about the what happened there in Sydney. Also, we have a story by Paul Petit, and he examines the new movie Nuremberg, talking about some of the war trials that happened, and in particular Hermann Göring. He was number 2 there in Nazi Germany. Fascinating movie, and how does it relate to the anti-Semitism going on today? Also, we talked to Joran Churanak. He scored and put the soundtrack for The First Christmas by Kevin Costner, and also a story about O Come Emmanuel, a great Advent hymn.
Okay, night 3 of Hannukah there in Israel. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Thank you, Chris, for your insights. We always look forward to hearing from you, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again in the days ahead. You can see the latest Jerusalem Dateline at 8 p.m. Eastern on the CBN News Channel. You can also watch the CBN News app on the CBN News app or on YouTube. In other news, 4 people are in custody for allegedly plotting to set off bombs at 5 companies in Southern California on New Year's Eve. The FBI says the group rehearsed the plot in the Mojave Desert just days ago. The suspects reportedly are members of a far-left group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front. They face charges of conspiracy and possession of an unregistered destructive device. Authorities also arrested a 5th suspect who might have been planning an attack in New Orleans. European Christmas markets have opened this year under very tight security. They've become a favorite target of Muslim terrorists. German officials have already foiled one plot to attack a market this month. Dale Hurd reports.
Terrorists have struck 7 European Christmas markets since 2014, 3 in France and 4 in Germany, all carried out by men of Muslim or Middle Eastern backgrounds. Authorities arrested 5 men suspected of planning attack number 8 in Germany last week. One of them, a Muslim cleric from a German mosque who urged his followers to kill as many people as possible. Christmas markets in many European nations must now be surrounded by barriers and security patrols. In Magdeburg last December, a man drove his SUV at a high rate of speed through the center of the Christmas market, killing 6 and injuring more than 300. In 2016, a Muslim terrorist drove a stolen semi-truck through a Christmas market in Berlin, killing 12 people and injuring 56. This Berlin woman says while the increased security makes her feel safe, it also reminds her that the threat is real. Germany's chancellor took a lot of heat for saying that Germans are afraid of public spaces because of the threat of violent crime from migrants. Chancellor Friedrich Merz's comment was ridiculed by some as racist, and yet polling shows most Germans do not feel safe in public spaces like Christmas markets. Andreas Liekert is a conservative parliament member in the state of Hessen.
This is, of course, a horrific development. We have too many radical Islamists and even inclined to use violence. And it's specifically our Christian background that's also being targeted.
Islam expert Robert Spencer says jihadists attack Christmas markets because they view the Christian belief that Jesus is the Son of God as sinful. And Christmas markets attract large numbers of Christians as well as non-Christians.
They believe that Christmas is not only a manifestation of unbelief, but of shirk, which is the worst sin in Islam. It is the association of partners with Allah. That is, you worship Allah, but you also worship various created beings, in this case, Jesus. It is the identification of Jesus as the Son of God that they object to.
Some have criticized the large sums of tax money spent on added security, saying European leaders also need to do something about the source of the threat. The large numbers of potentially violent jihadists now living in Europe. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Now to the latest on the search for the killer in the Brown University shooting. Investigators are asking for help to identify the man involved in the killing of 2 students and injuring 9 others. Authorities released several surveillance videos taken around the time of the shooting, and the FBI is offering a $50,000 award for locating this person of interest. The shooting happened Saturday afternoon. The gunman opened fire on campus while students were taking exams. Coming up, navigating religious trauma. We'll look at what it means to stay, walk away, or rebuild in the church. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. For some, church is a place of safety and belonging. But for others, it can be a source of pain. Church hurt has become a familiar term describing the impact caused by spiritual abuse or toxic environments. CBN's Brody Carter reports on those navigating religious trauma and what it means to stay, walk away, or rebuild.
Spiritual abuse can happen in different ways. A mark left by the church, whether good or bad, can last a lifetime.
If people are hearing messages all the time about you're bad, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, you're the worst, that environment could be considered an abusive environment that could evoke a trauma response in an individual.
Dr. Catherine Keller, a therapist in Dallas, Texas, says a church culture of fear and shame can leave people feeling like outsiders, even ostracized over political or theological differences. She tells CBN News the #1 issue clients bring to her is religious trauma, and she compares it to domestic violence.
There's an idea called the power and control wheel, where it talks about different elements of power and control in abusive relationships. When I train therapists on religious trauma, I use that model that comes from the domestic violence literature and cater it to what happens in high control religious systems.
Keller adds the definition of church hurt is broad, typically stemming from experiences of fear, control, or shame within controlling spiritual environments.
Healed people will also help heal people. And that's the beauty of the family of God, is that we can simultaneously be hurt and healing at the same time as we live together in unity.
Author Natalie Runyon understands that struggle. As a pastor's kid who grew up serving in church, she considered walking away after her father had to resign from his position. Studies show more than 1 million Americans leave the church each year, many never returning.
You know, I always kept going back. Even when I would get hurt by a church, I never left the church. I never isolated. I always had women and pastors around me that were constantly reminding me of the goodness of the Lord.
Natalie says during that experience, her faith took a new turn. What began as a personal journey became her platform, and eventually the book, Raised to Stay.
That was actually one of the biggest criticisms that I got when I would hashtag Raised to Stay. People would say, "Are you telling us to stay?" in abusive, toxic environments? And the answer was absolutely not. What I'm doing is saying that if you find yourself in that, get out, but hold on to Jesus. Remain with Jesus. John 15, remain in me and I will remain in you. Stay with me and I will stay with you, to give you discernment to know, hey, you've got to get out of here and go somewhere healthy.
Although they took different paths, both Natalie and Dr. Keller say separating faith from toxic structures led to a stronger, more honest relationship with God.
God had always been faithful to me. He had always shown up. He had always been the father he said he was going to be. So yes, all these people had failed me. But when I looked back over the course of my life, God never had. So it was either turn away from the one who had never failed me because of a few people who did, or stay in position with him and let him do what his word promised.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Still ahead, one doctor discusses a plan to hold on to valuable muscle while losing weight. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. In just over 2 weeks, many people will resolve to lose weight in 2026. On this week's Healthy Living, Dr. William Davis, author of the new book, Super Body, warns against losing precious muscle. He discusses his plan to hold on to muscle while still dropping those unwanted pounds.
We're going to address factors that cause muscle or accelerate muscle loss. We have to exemplary. Just by aging, doing nothing else but aging, which we all do, of course, we lose about 30% of our youthful muscle. So by age 70, you have many, many pounds less muscle than you had. And that's a critical thing because that accelerates all kinds of phenomena. Your exposure, for instance, to diseases, frailty, loss of independence, dementia, all those things we all dread. Now, we accelerate that process when we lose weight because all those methods I mentioned, diets, bariatric procedures, pharmaceuticals. Let's say you spent $12,000 for a GLP-1 agonist drug. That's what it costs, about a year, let's say.
For common folks, GLP agonists are Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, those other ones with the shots.
Exactly. And you know what, Lori? They work. You do lose. Let's say you paid $12,000 to lose 40 pounds. You think things are great, right? You fit into your size 8 dress now instead of a size 36 or whatever. But of the 40 pounds you lost, 10 pounds was muscle. You stopped the drug. Most people can't afford that forever, especially now with the way the economy is. You regain all the fat and more. You don't regain muscle, maybe a little bit, but that's it. You're now much more muscle depleted than you were. And your exposure to conditions like dementia, heart disease, coronary disease, disability is now worse than it was before. There have been many studies in which people who've lost a lot of weight were tracked over 10 years, 20 years. So in aggregate, we're talking about over 60,000 people. These are large databases like NHANES, the NIH's database, or EPIC Norfolk, Western European, or the ASPRI. 60,000 people tracked over many years. And it's become clear, people who've lost 10% or more of their weight by reducing calories. Think about that. A 180-pound woman losing 18 pounds. Not uncommon. A 240-pound guy losing 24 pounds. Very common. You've shaved several years off your life. In fact, the mortality rate about over 8 to 10 years is about 50%. So old thinking is fatal thinking. It sets you up for accelerated disability and even death. And so what I'm trying to do, Lori, is educate people. There are things you can do that have nothing to do with going to the gym. You could do that. That's great, go to the gym. But there are things you can do to set right the situation in the first place that prevents the loss of and dysfunction of muscle.
It's so important to hold on to your muscle. We know that if you have muscle, you're less likely to break something as you get older. And we know that falls and broken bones are one of the leading causes of death for some of our senior citizens. And as you point out in your book, muscle actually improves your metabolism better than fat, right?
Absolutely. And you can often think about muscle as antagonizing fat. That is fat, but fat specifically, Lori, in the abdomen. The fat in your buttocks, in your neck or chest, so-called subcutaneous fat. It may be an aesthetic issue, but it's really not a danger to you beyond just added weight on your weight-bearing joints. It's the fat in your abdomen. It's the fat that encircles your intestines and liver and pancreas. That's a very problematic form of fat. And even worse, the more abdominal fat you have, the more you have what's called myosteatosis, infiltration of muscle with fat. Once that starts, which is a very common accompaniment to abdominal fat, so you have a protuberant tummy from abdominal fat, you likely have fat around your heart, accelerating heart disease, in your pancreas, accelerating diabetes, in your kidneys, damaging your kidneys, and in your muscle, eroding strength and impairing muscle mass.
You can find out more about the book Super Body from its author, Dr. William Davis, on this week's edition of Healthy Living. It's today on the CBN News Channel at 2:30 and 8:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Well, stay with us. More CBN News Watch right after this. Actor Jonathan Roumie, who is known for playing the role of Jesus in The Chosen, says the show is impacting people around the world, including lifelong atheists who have turned their lives to Christ. Roumie talked about the series' impact on the ABC show The View. He says The Chosen is far-reaching and discussed several atheists who wrote him about how the show saved them. The Chosen has been seen by more than 280 million people in 175 countries since season 1. The show is also recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the most translated season for a streaming series in history. Well, that's it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. We hope you join us next time. Have a great day.